Hello, everyone. My name is Miranda, and I am your Enchantress of Avalon, taking you on a magical and mystical journey to the sacred Isle of Avalon. For this week's video, I would like to discuss one of the most important figures in both Arthurian legends and Avalonian history. So, I've already done a discussion on Morgan Le Fay, and there will be many more, I'm sure, on her. But for today's video, I am going to be talking about the Lady of the Lake. Now, the Lady of the Lake is sometimes seen as one particular character, and especially very early versions, but most often it's a title and it could be attributed to several figures within a single Arthurian text because the title can be passed. And that's what we see, especially in like the Mallory version. We see at least, 2 to 3 figures who are titled Ladies of the Lake. And I do want to go a little bit into the backstory that the Lady of the Lake or the Ladies of the Lake are often attributed to being a special species of water fairy. They are Garuth Anun, which is the plural. I do not remember the singular, but the Garuth Anun are a group of water maidens and lake maidens whose name literally translates to wives of the underworld. So they're associated with both water and the cycle of life, death, and rebirth. And we see a lot of that parallel in the Arthurian legends and the connection to the Ladies of the Lake. So, nowadays, the most common name we get associated with the Lady of the Lake is Vivian. And that's what she's usually called in a lot of our more modern versions of the story. However, her name wasn't always Vivian. She's had so many different names as history has evolved, and she was also often in earlier medieval texts known as Nimue. Now, there is often a discussion over whether Vivian and Nimue were the same character with a different name, or whether they were separate lake maidens. And in some versions, you have them as totally separate characters. Both Nimue and Vivian exist, but they are different characters. So you will have that. And also then there's confusion. Well, which one fostered Lancelot? Because that's an important thing that the Lady of the Lake does. She is the foster mother of Sir Lancelot, which is why he is known as Lancelot du Lac, which in French means of the lake. Okay. And I do want to mention that the title of Lady of the Lake is often also passed on to Morgan Le Fay herself. It is thought in some versions where Morgan doesn't start out as a leader of Avalon, she becomes the leader of Avalon when she gets the title of Lady of the Lake. And that was used, say, in like Marion Zimmer Bradley's Mist of Avalon. Vivian was her aunt, and Vivian had the title, and it then would eventually pass to Morgan herself. And that's why she went to collect Arthur after the Battle of Camlan. That was a very Lady of the Lake thing to do. Now, I want to start kind of with the positive Lady of the Lake aspects, and then we'll go and look at the negative ones. In the positive, as I said, she was a foster mother, or in some versions they actually say she was the mother of Lancelot du Lac. And that is obviously a very positive thing. He was taught both warfare and courtly manners, which allowed him to go into the court of Camelot and become the greatest knight at that court for a time at least, and the closest confidant of the king of Camelot himself, Arthur. That's pretty great. She also, this is a big one, it was her who gifted Excalibur to Arthur in the first place. And it was her who Excalibur needed to be returned to when Arthur was laying dying. So, I mentioned in my Morgan Le Fay video that Excalibur and the Sword and the Stone are different. The Sword and the Stone was the sword that granted the knowledge that Arthur was the true king of England. It was a big deal, but it wasn't a great weapon. This was an old sword that had been stuck in a stone for years and years. He pulled it out, and he did use it in battle for quite a while, but it broke. Then Merlin took him to the lake, and the Lady of the Lake gifted him Excalibur with the contingent that, you have to return this. Like, the contingency plan was, this can't just be passed to another soldier. It needs to be returned here. This is an Avalonian blade. This is a fairy crafted blade. I need it back. You are allowed to use it. No one else is supposed to. So he takes the sword, and then he is very impressed by it. It's this very powerful blade. And there's a famous quote. It appears definitely in the Mallory. I think it might appear in other versions too, where Merlin asks Arthur which he prefers, the sword or the scabbard. And he says, well, I prefer the sword, of course. And Merlin says, then you are unwise. The scabbard will protect the carrier from being injured in battle. You cannot lose blood. You will not bleed out and die in battle. The scabbard is the more important piece, not the sword itself. Because again, both are magical. And of course, I do want to delve a little into the story of Morgana and the sword because, well, why won't I? I love Morgana Le Fay. And she technically does eventually become the Lady of the Lake in a lot of versions, so this is valid. Merlin says to Arthur that at points when he's not using a sword, it might be smart to give it into the safekeeping of someone whom he trusts completely. And so Arthur trusts completely his sister, Morgan Le Fay. We learn that that wasn't a very smart move on his part, for when he gives her the sword, she takes the sword in the scabbard, and she comes up with a plan. Because Morgana knows Arthur loves her, but she doesn't love Arthur. She views him as just another version of his father, Uther. His father who had raped her mother, who had sent her to a nunnery and married off her sisters, and then who had tried to plan a marriage. And I believe in that version, Arthur actually was the one that married her to King Arthurian, but still. He only did bad by Morgana, and he killed her father, raped her mother, and then her mother married him. She had to, and then he married off her sisters into unions they didn't want. She had to live in a nunnery. I mean, yeah, she spent that time learning necromancy and witchcraft, but still, she's pissed. And Arthur is the product of all of this. He was born from this, literally. So she blames Arthur for a lot of it. And she happily takes the sword, plays the good sister, and says, of course I'll protect your sword for you. Then she goes and meets with her lover, Sir Accolon. And she comes up with this plan. She was like, well, I want you to actually wield Excalibur. I am going to make a counterfeit version with my witchcraft and enchant it so that Arthur thinks it's Excalibur, and a counterfeit scabbard as well, and you'll have the real one. I'll protect you this way. And he takes it, although she then sets up a challenge, a duel between Arthur and this unknown knight. Now, Accolon does not know he's dueling Arthur. Arthur does not know he's dueling Accolon. Accolon does know he has Excalibur. He knows that he has the blade. Arthur thinks he has Excalibur, but he has a fake sword. And they duel. And Arthur is very confused because he's getting injured. He's getting tired. He's losing blood, and he shouldn't be. And then he looks at the sword and the scabbard his opponent has. And again, their faces are covered. They don't know who each other is. And he realizes what's happened. So he's able to wrest the sword and, more importantly, the scabbard from his opponent. And he kills his opponent. When, his helmet is taken off, he realizes it's Sir Accolon. He orders the knights surrounding him to take Accolon to his sister Morgan so she could pay her respects, because Accolon is dead. This is an incredibly important story in the Arthurian legends. It is Morgana's attempt at gaining power. And in revenge, she first tries to kill her husband and fails because her son stops her. And then she sends a poisoned garment to Arthur, claiming it's a sign of peace. But the Lady of the Lake happens to be at the court at the time and says, "Don't put that on." And so the messenger tries it on and dies, and they realize what's happened. So in this way, the current Lady of the Lake is opposing Morgan. And anyway, in any case, the negative aspects of the Lady of the Lake, I have a few more minutes left of the video, and I'll go into them quickly. And that is basically the Merlin story, the Merlin of it all. Merlin, in most versions of the legends, was a lover of the Lady of the Lake at one point or another. And it was her that became his undoing. So in some versions, they just totally give the story to Morgana, and in other versions, it's specifically one of the other lake maidens, whether it's Nimue or Vivian. And the story goes that Merlin fell madly in love with this woman. She was gorgeous and sexy and youthful and full of energy and vitality, and he just had to get some. So he starts pursuing her. She has no interest in this aged mage, but she is interested in his knowledge. So she flirts and gains all she can from him. Maybe even does sleep with him for a time in order to, in some versions she sleeps with him, in others she doesn't. Sleeps with him to get what she wants, which is his knowledge. And once she's exhausted all of his knowledge, she decides to use everything he taught against her. So she imprisons him, usually in a tree fortress or in a cave, a crystal cave of some sort, because there is Merlin's cave, which is Crystal Cave, that he was imprisoned in. Or there's the tree thing, where he's imprisoned in this cavern of a tree. No matter which version, the Lady of the Lake caused the undoing. Whether she was Morgan Le Fay, who is a Lady of the Lake, whether she was Nimue or Vivian. All of that being said, this is only one version of why Merlin disappeared and of his undoing. In many other versions, the earlier versions before this came about in the High Middle Ages, we had earlier tales of Merlin's retreat on his own. He chose to retreat to the Crystal Cave and had his lover or his sister, some versions it's a lover, some versions it's a sister, imprison him until he was ready to, rejoin society again, presumably after the fall of Arthur. So that is an overview of who the Lady of the Lake is in the legends. She is the gifter of Excalibur, and then Excalibur must be returned to her. She is a Lady of Avalon, usually the leader of Avalon, especially when she's Morgan Le Fay. And she's the lover of Merlin and the foster mother of Lancelot du Lac. I hope that you have enjoyed this journey into Avalon with me, Miranda, your Enchantress of Avalon. And I do hope you will like, follow, subscribe to both this channel, my YouTube channel, my twitch.tv channel at Avalon Enchant. My Twitter is at Avalon Enchant as well. And my blog is whiteroseofavalon.life, which I actually just yesterday, Saturday, posted my 300th blog post. So it's going strong and I don't plan on stopping. So I hope that you enjoy what I do here. And if you do, don't hesitate to leave a comment and get in contact with me. Have a wonderful week, and I will see you next Sunday.